I'm okay doing it, but.
So I call to order this May 18th, 2023 meeting of the Centreville Town Council. We'll start as we normally do with the Pledge of Allegiance, and if folks can remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Council should have the minutes from May 4th, 2023 in their packet. Any changes, or is there a motion to adopt those minutes?
Make a motion to adopt the minutes of the May 4th meeting.
Second.
Any comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Now have a citizens forum. The town clerk will read the public comment statement when she gets back.
Welcome to this meeting of the Centreville Town Council. This is a public meeting and we welcome your participation. By attending, you acknowledge that this session is recorded and aired live on QACTV 7. During the meeting, we ask that you turn your cell phones off and hold personal conversations outside the meeting room. The scheduled agenda is available on the information table just outside. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person. The Town Council respects and appreciates your desire and right to convey your message freely, and in keeping with the dignity of proceedings, we ask that all views be expressed in a respectful and civil manner. Comments longer than 3 minutes should be submitted in writing. If questions are a part of your comments, we'll refer those to the appropriate individual. Thank you.
Got a few folks signed up tonight. Mr. Herman?
Yes, good evening. Most of you know me, but for the ones who don't, my name is Royce Herman. I live in Centreville Heights, and I earned my economics degree and my political science minor from the University of Delaware. So that's what I base my comments on. Raising taxes, which is what you're doing. I mean, let's face it, the county's doing the same thing, except they're not calling it that. And it's never a good idea in a recession. And don't kid yourself, we are in a recession of sorts. Not serious yet, but it will be. If you keep raising taxes, it'll get here even faster. Every dollar that is spent in increased taxes is $1 less that's spent in the local stores and markets and gas stations and so forth. So you've got a large percentage of senior citizens in this town, and some of them are representative here, myself included. And our income doesn't go up when taxes go up. So I would recommend professionally that you withhold raising taxes for 1 year until this situation we're faced with right now turns around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lilich?
Good evening. My name is Joe Lilac, and I am the commander of the American Legion here in Centreville. While I'm not a resident of Centreville, I live just outside of town. I represent approximately 400 members of my Legion, most of which are residents of Centreville. Again, I'd like to thank you for the April 20th consensus for the recommendation of to amend the ordinance to allow digital signage in Centreville with restrictions. I'd like to reaffirm the support of that, and with the notion that it's not just a Legion, something that's going to benefit the Legion. It's going to benefit a lot of other organizations inside of Centreville, such as the high schools and the police departments. It is a major way that we can communicate with the public, not just the Legion, but the police department and the schools can communicate. It'll help us get the word out to our members in the community. That will help us raise more money as well, which all that money goes right back out into the community. So there's really, it's a win for everyone in my opinion. We are also, as stated before, very much in agreement of a compromise of sizes and colors and the limitation of the frequency of changing and stuff like that. So I hope we can move forward with this and get this done. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's everybody that signed up, and anybody else is welcome to share their comments. All right. We are going to swear some folks in tonight, board, commission, and oaths of office. I'm going to come down there. We've got Rich Ryan, Sandy Simpson, Carrie's not here,
There's three, and Jim Watson.
and James Watson. We're trying to harmonize this oath of office at one
Do you
time.
want to use this one?
Sure. Yeah. So if everybody could raise their right hand, say aye. And pronounce your name in full.
Richard Ryan,
Sandra A. Simpson.
Do solemnly affirm
Do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and that I will be faithful
that I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance
and
bear true allegiance
to the state of Maryland
to the state of Maryland,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and that I will,
that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of
execute the office of
member of the Centreville Park Advisory Board.
member of the Centreville Park Advisory Board,
What do you like? Election vote.
You got it.
Close enough. Laws of the state,
the Constitution and laws of the state,
the town charter,
town charter,
and laws and ordinances of the town of Centreville.
and laws and ordinances of the town of Centreville.
Thank you all. Well done. All right. We will now move into a public hearing on the constant yield tax rate, which I have I will now convene this hearing concerning the constant yield tax rate for the town of Centreville for fiscal year 2024. Ms. Luffman, could you please provide comments regarding the constant yield tax rate?
So this is the same tax rate as last year. We're still staying at 53.5 cents like that last year, and it's just slightly above the constant yield of 0.5247.
Okay, can you just clarify what the current tax
The
rate?
current tax rate is 53.5 cents
All right.
for 23, and will stay the same for FY '24.
Right, and the constant yield tax rate would be,
0.5247.
all right, thank you. I will now call upon Carolyn Brinkley, Town Clerk, to present evidence of the published notice of this hearing.
Certificate of Publication, State of Maryland, County of Queen Anne's. This is to certify that the annex legal advertisement has been published in the Bay Times Record Observer for 28/2023.
We will first hear from all those in favor of the proposed constant yield tax rate, and then hear from those opposed. Please keep all comments to 3 minutes. You are welcome to provide written testimony to the town council as well. We'll dispense with the public comment guidelines since the town clerk already read those, and we'll move right into hearing from all those in favor of the proposed constant yield tax rate. We We will now hear from all those opposing the proposed constant yield tax rate. We'll note Mr. Herman has already spoken on this matter. Anybody else? The Centreville Town Council will consider all comments presented this evening before making a final decision. The public hearing on the budget for fiscal year 2024 will be held on June 1st, 2023. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this hearing?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we declare this hearing adjourned.
If I may add a comment?
Sure.
As I stated during our budget hearings, the constant yield tries to generate the same amount of revenue last year based on the new aggregate appraised value of the town. It would seem that everyone's appraised value went up incrementally, and for those people to be able to pay the same amount in taxes, you would charge them based on the constant yield rate. That's the concept of constant yield. So as Mr. Herman has described, keeping the same rate against a higher appraised value essentially raises taxes on everybody.
Anybody else?
I have been against being, maintaining constant yield. I mean, not recently, but in the far past. And I think this year, due to inflation especially, that the town really does need the additional revenue. I also realize that Social Security recipients and also my government pension increased a significant amount, much larger than this is a 2.2%. Well, it's not a tax increase. It would be, we would have to decrease the tax rate by about 2% in order to maintain constant yield, which is much lower than what the current inflation rate is. So therefore, I guess I support maintaining the current tax rate.
How much revenue does this generate for us?
It's like 93,000, right?
$93,000 townwide.
Difference between the two.
Right. So I just want to, so we had a lot of budget workshops. We had them every week for 5 weeks. And, I would encourage participation in the future in those workshops, because we go through really, I think, with a fine-tooth comb on those line items. And I think, we spend a lot of time and a lot of diligence walking through every line item. And there are things that this council has said no to pretty unequivocally because we can't afford it. I mean, I just want to dispel the notion that we're up here spending, unwisely. We increased our funding to the fire department, probably the biggest percentage increase in the whole budget from one fiscal year to the next was for the Centreville, Goodwill Fire Department. Show us where to cut. I think to Councilperson's Worth's point, inflation is killing the town budget. Debt is killing the town budget. This budget commits to paying down a bigger chunk of the debt than we have to pay down to try and get some money back into our budget in future fiscal years. I would love for the easy cuts to present themselves, because the cuts we're making now, like not having an additional police officer, are pretty tough as it is. Asking officers to be on the job when there's maybe sometimes just one of them, because we can't afford to have two and in some cases preferably 3 officers on the ground at one time, is already a tough decision to make. And we see when we put off big capital projects, which this town did for a decade or more, those projects don't get any cheaper. So we're staring down the barrel of, this budget included $500,000 for a vacuum truck. I don't know what a vacuum truck does, but it costs a lot of money, helps out the town Public Works Department. That's been in the budget for how many years has that been in the budget?
I think the last ask I'm aware of was 2017, but the truck that we replaced was 40 years old.
Yeah, the truck we're replacing is 40 years old, and when that new truck first made its way into the budget, it was $300,000. Now it's $500,000. So I would love to be up here cutting taxes, would love it. I just don't think that we can. And I think this is a prudent budget.
And if I may add, I see merit in everything that has been said tonight. I don't want to repeat anything unnecessarily, and I would just further add that we are blessed, and everyone in this room and everybody at home can rest assured that we are blessed with the best department heads when it comes to coming to us with a budget of items that have been heavily scrutinized internally to their department. And I'll just note, as I have in the past, our Public Works Director in particular will come with a bare bones minimum and leave still operating with his department vehicles that are rusted out, have holes in the floor that you can see the road as they're driving, which is unacceptable. And so rest assured that we have a wonderful team of folks in each department that are doing, I feel, a really good job whittling down each respective budget. So I think we've arrived, based on the inputs we've received and the intense amount of time we spent studying each line item one by one, that it's the best scenario that we've been able to come up with. So I would just echo your sentiments.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I agree. And when we started out the budget process, I was in favor of the constant yield. But as we went through, it's just super clear the deferral of all these capital needs has gotten to an untenable place. And while I also don't know exactly what a vacuum truck does, it was explained to us as needed for emergent water and sewer situations. And I feel super strongly that if we're going to do things as a town, have a water utility, have a police department, have the things that the residents of this town value, we got to do them well. We can't just have them and defer everything that they need to be successful and just wait till some future time where there's, magical new tax dollars. It's just not going to come. And so I'm in favor of the moves that we made in this budget and think it's an incredibly responsible budget and an incredibly responsible tax rate.
Anything else? We will move into old business, which is a second reading of this budget. And I'll just read an ordinance for the purpose of adopting a budget for the town of Centreville for fiscal year 2024. And as I said before, we'll have a hearing on this June the 1st. So that's our next meeting. So come on out for that one too. We'll move into new business, and maybe before we get to let's swap these if we can, because I think we have a lot of people in the crowd who want to hear the digital signage discussion, so maybe we'll start with that.
That sounds good. Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity, and fellow council members, to discuss this issue again. The first part of the title slide, digital signage considerations, is what we are going to do in the next several slides. And then the aspiration point of the slides is hopefully arriving this evening at a consensus around a recommendation that we can send to the Planning Commission. What I did was I took the slides that I had presented last time, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on these since we did see these before, but just kind of reminding everyone what we saw last time and how we arrived at least at the consensus that we were willing to consider some level of digital signage with a tremendous amount of limitations, going even further than what the county has proposed. So this is the list, of course, of what we don't want to do. This list is based on my conversations with staff, members of the Planning Commission that I've run into. I didn't seek them out, I promise you, and then members of this council. So, we definitely don't want anything in the downtown. We don't want high-resolution color TV imagery that looks like you're watching something on Netflix or what have you. Only alphanumeric characters. So no animation, no playing of videos, no sound in particular. No more really than two colors, the foreground color and then a black background. And then in the last version of this slide, this last bullet had read every 30 seconds. And based on what is in our current code, no more than every 5 minutes. So those would be the signs, I believe, Sharon, that are the exception that we're grandfathered in. Benefits.
Ones that were grandfathered in can change more frequently than that. Is that what you're saying?
No.
These are the standards that apply to the ones that were grandfathered in.
Okay,
And what I had presented last time was based on the county standard, which was every 30 seconds it could change. So I did amend that last bullet to reflect the more restrictive language that we currently have in our code. Thank you.
and do you know how many signs were grandfathered in the fire department?
Is it 3? I keep hearing that as a number. I may be wrong.
I thought it was more like 4. I don't know. Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly
either.
that.
Who's got them?
There's the Shore United,
Oh, yeah.
Fire department.
Goodwill Fire.
Okay, we'll figure it out. We're going to log this down for that. Thank you.
Benefits, we don't need to spend a lot of time here. The critical messaging, the fact that these signs typically, not all of them, but we would encourage, of course, anybody out there that's going to get something like this to have the kind of sign that can be updated based on a phone app so that you can change things real time. So for the Legion, obviously, you know, if they have an event that's going to be rained out, how great is it that you don't need to come in and change the letters on the sign, that sort of thing. This really does help improve communication. And the reality is, I think we need to strike a balance between wanting to maintain, and I feel this way very strongly, having grown up here from the age of 12 on, the historic flavor of this community. We don't want Times Square to ever be something that people would compare this town to. But somewhere is a balance that I believe we can strike. And the reality is we have an entire generation of kids, and I hate this, by the way, about this generation, that are so focused on this every day. But this is what gets people's attention. And the digital and just looking for that messaging, that's what gets people's attention. And I think it's helpful, especially when I looked, you know, what other communities are doing online, similar to what we're considering. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. This, of course, is what I presented last time, which I did borrow from some of their language. But this is pretty much what the county signage ordinance consists of, just those bullets. And then, of course, there's a package that you complete that comes along with that for those that want to submit an application. So here are the options. I've been working with Sharon to kind of contextualize the discussion we've had up to this point, and then moving forward this evening, ideally, with a recommendation. So one of the options, option 1, would be to allow governmental and institutional uses in non-residential and non-CBD zones. And then option 2, and I do have a copy of the, on the next slide, the zones for those in the room and those at home. I believe we each have in our packets, just so that you can kind of perspective on some of the different agencies and where they sit. So, and I apologize if I already did too, only allow government institutional uses in C2 and C3, and then finally only allow in C2 and C3. All 3 of those options, at least what I would propose, would be that they would be subject to the supplemental standards in the zoning ordinance. So that's what we already sort of talked about in the earlier slide. And then just as an info item, American Legion is zoned C2. I did re-verify with Sid Pender, the Chief Operating Officer of the Queen Anne's County Public Schools, that they are absolutely interested in having a sign for one of the 2 schools, preferably the high school. And so you see the current standards, and I appreciate Sharon, you providing those so that I could include those. And I am going to
Before you go any further, does the American Legion qualify as an institutional use?
I think so, and they talked about, I think previously, that they have some kind of government.
They have a congressional charter,
We're charged with Congress.
which, I mean, Congress hasn't chartered anything in like 50 years, so you have to be a really old nonprofit to have a congressional charter with a national presence. So is the high school in the C3?
It looks like R2.
I think it's R2. Yeah, it's an R2.
R2, I believe, actually.
So it wouldn't, because
Can we do it by use rather than?
I am not personally supportive of every county or government building in town. I mean, there's too many of them. So I'm not personally supportive of every school or every office that the state or the county has to be able to have one. I think we have enough, you know, light pollution from those uses on that side of town that I don't know why we would need to add digital signs. And it can be a character building exercise for a high school student to change the sign. I'm like unconvinced by the need for quick sign change for the school system. I remain supportive in the zone where the Legion is, but not for every government use in town.
And I totally agree with what you said. I would only defer on a scenario where we had an active assailant at a school and we needed to have instantaneous messaging. There's not going to be any changing out of those.
We hear a
manually.
lot from the police and around this issue about an active assailant situation, and I just don't know that there's gonna be a person that's like, quick, change the digital sign.
I'm just saying, as one who, that's my background, I have read probably 100 after-action reports on these scenarios, and the schools that had that capability absolutely used it.
Well, if it's up to me, our school won't have that capability, so it won't be an issue here, won't matter.
Well, they're not covered, the high school wouldn't be covered in any of those options.
Right, because you're saying it's over here in R2.
It's our, for sure.
Well, they could put a sign up at the future Board of Ed building, which is C2.
Yeah,
Part of it is, part of the county property is.
well, it's all gonna be rezoned C2, right? Isn't that what the,
No, they're keeping the dual zoning.
okay.
Yeah, it's a special exception. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So current standards, just to go through those, message can't change any more than 5 minutes. We talked about that. The change occurs over a 2-second period with no fade in or fade out. Static messages with no movement or optical illusion of any kind of movement. Only alphabetic or numeric characters, no graphic, pictorial, or photographic image. Automatic dimming depending on the level of ambient light. Maximum brightness of 0.3 foot candles. Single color only, black background. If adjacent to residential, turned off between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., no audio, and if it does malfunction, it must freeze, either static, be blank, or turn off, no other options. And just because we've talked about this and it's an ongoing issue, I know our council vice president has been beating this drum pretty hard. If we're going to look at potentially allowing any level of digital signage, then we have got to insist on compliance with those that have been grandfathered in. And so as our formal,
And those that haven't,
yes.
just the straight up illegal
Thank
signs
you.
that we have.
Thank you for adding that. I add that to my comments as well. So we have got to get a handle on code enforcement. More, I know there's efforts in that area, but I would like to see more, especially if we're going to have folks show up asking for an allowance of some level of digital signage when those that don't have permission and those that do are not compliant. So I would just add that. For those at home and in the room, oops. I don't know why that last one's not in there. I had a picture of the zoning, I apologize. So that really concludes the slides. I'm hoping last time we had a discussion on this, there were 4 of us here. Councilmember Worth was not present that evening. But we had consensus among the 4 of us to move forward with this discussion, and I'm hoping that we can allow some level that is, I'm sorry. Oh, there it is, yes.
There's a map you can't read.
Miraculously. Yeah.
The bright orange is the C2.
When you say
Thank you.
adjacent to residential, does that also include across the street from? Is across the street considered adjacent?
Well, unless you want to propose an additional standard, what we talked about was not, we don't have anything in those proposals that included that, but you could include it in an additional standard that has a setback, is how I would do it from residential if you wanted to, rather than adjacency.
Well, so like, for instance, the whole Railroad Avenue
Right,
is adjacent to R2. It's across the street.
from residential, right.
Yep. So
Although-
if the sheriff's department wanted to put one in, and the storage place wanted to put one in, and riding my way down the road there, you could have a lot of them. right
Carmichael
across-
House, the post office.
I'm sorry, you're talking about the timing standard, the
Yeah,
different
the 10 to
timing
6. Yeah,
standard,
what does adjacent mean?
So I would say it connects at some point, whether it's across the street would still be considered adjacent,
Okay.
I think.
Is there any reason we couldn't limit it to only the C2? Like, why the C2 and the C3?
I think anything that applies to C2 applies to C3.
Yeah, the way our zoning
Progressive
ordinance
zoning,
works.
Yeah.
Got it.
C3.
I would
Maybe
like
if they're, sorry, Dan, let me say this right quick on the old topic here of adjacent to residential. Maybe if it's across the street or adjacent to residential, that the sign has to be perpendicular to that line to the residence so that it's not shining directly at residential neighborhoods.
Right.
Or-
If Vincent Center put one in, it could just be, you could just read it from your house, Jim. Beautiful.
I
For the record, hold on one second, I got to throw this in. Just for the record, Jim Beecham is right next to the Vincent building. So not like 4 or 5 houses away. So Your point is noted, but I do want to just, for anybody that may not know, I hope that's okay that I just revealed your address.
All right.
I didn't say which direction that house was.
I would like to point out that I guess the current draft of the comp plan calls for the C3 corridor, at least up to Little Hut Drive, to be included in the CBD. So that would include the sheriff's office. So if you restrict it to C2 and C3, ultimately that corridor would, not be allowed to have signs, so.
And just so I'm following along with the map, what portion of the CBD? Not all of it, you said
They're
only
saying the CBD
only to
extends.
Little Hut?
The C3 that's on the north, actually all of that north, C3, that's kind of on either side of Railroad Avenue.
Right here.
Right,
Up
is
to-
becoming
up to
CBD
Little
in
Hut.
the,
It doesn't include the, I guess that's the Acme Shopping Center, right?
Yeah.
which already has one for the gas station.
So the gas station's sign, like price sign, qualifies as a...
It's a digital sign.
Yeah, I think there is some federal exemption for gas station pricing because they need to be able to adjust it.
Yeah.
So we're preempted, I think, on that particular.
Okay.
And the same at City.
But just in terms of saturation.
I mean, my concern about, that we've sort of alluded to here, is I would like nothing more than to be able to tuck a sign into the American Legion, right, for that. I think it gets, after you establish that, it gets really hard. It gets really, really difficult to do this. And my understanding is, before my time on the council, and before my time as liaison to the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission attempted to start with an ordinance that would get the American Legion to sign. Is that the way you generally remember that?
I don't remember what initiated it to
I
begin
don't mean
with.
like, it might not have been the genesis of the whole idea, but I know they tried to get the American Legion to sign and just couldn't get there. And so I've got concern about spending a lot more of the town's time and energy and money in legal fees and things of that nature to try and change an ordinance that has kind of already been down this road. And despite the fact that I have no objections to the American Legion getting a sign, the adjacency to residential neighborhoods, who is going to enforce that? That if you put something, and I know it's going to change, but if you put something in an adjacent commercial district to a residential district, what member of the town staff is going to go out there and say, this sign's not off, you got to turn it off? And we do not have the track record of doing that in this town, period. Yep. And that requires somebody to wear the black hat, right? You're regulating and enforcing rules at that point, and we just don't have the track record of doing that. And so I just consider myself a little concerned about enforcement of standards that you can't even comprehend these things.
So what if the ordinance restricted it to a certain type of roadway, and that it must be the same zoning on both sides of the roadway?
Can we do that, Sharon?
It's getting close to spot zoning, right?
Well, it's responding to all the concerns we've raised.
It does. And I just want to echo the comments about enforcement, because I too would love to see a sign on at the Legion. I think that's the perfect example of where it makes sense. But I've been beating this drum about the illegal sign in the historic district since the moment that thing went up. And it violates even all of these. I mean, it's graphic, it's a damn computer screen. So I just struggle that, yeah, we're going to have any enforcement of a 10 to 6. I mean, who do you call at 4 a.m. if it's on and it's shining in your window?
Sharon and I met last week to start talking about some options for the enforcement phases. And,
But options exist. All due respect, options exist.
They do.
The current charter allows you to fine people $1,000. I mean, options exist. We've chosen not to execute on our options.
And I would hope that we don't not consider something that part of our community would like because of our failure to execute our enforcement efforts. I absolutely understand the points that have been raised, but I think those are two conversations. And I think, like you've said, Council Vice President, that drum has been beat as long as I've been on the council, which is the same amount of time you have, and I would like to see improvement in that.
They are and are not two different conversations, only because if we make it super strict, if we make it as strict as Councilmember Beecham is saying, as in this specific zone, these certain times, you know, et cetera, where do you go? If you're a resident and you're concerned about the, where do you go? Because it's not, I don't know where you go, because I've been trying and nothing's happened, so where do you go? If it's being improperly used. If the sign's changing every 10 seconds and it's causing traffic issues for distraction or whatever, where do you go?
Current examples might be some off-street parking lot lights that are not consistent with the promises made in front of Planning Commission for site plan approval. Those things exist. Not only the time of the light, but the fact that there's light pollution across property lines. Those promises were made to Planning Commission.
Were indeed. So you said a certain road type?
I suggested that we could limit it to a certain road type, or we just limit it to road frontage with similar zoning on both sides of the road, which would enable 3 different areas of the town.
The police department could have one, right, according to,
Yeah.
want to put the map back up there for the,
Thank you.
so the police department, if you're looking at that, is up in the sort of top little orange piece there, near the purple piece.
Across from the restaurant.
Rosendale Realty,
CR Realty.
sorry.
It's
Hard
all
to keep the
the-
realtors
It's
straight.
all the same. Yeah.
In there, yeah. So C2, both sides of the street, which would cover,
But because, so would it also cover, and what is is this
But
the,
they're also adjacent to residential there. At least one of the
Citgo
parcels would
Station.
be adjacent to residential.
what is this this
it
like
off.
sliver of
Care,
C3 on
probably.
Pennsylvania
That
Avenue?
probably.
That's the property we own?
Yeah, yes,
No, that is the,
yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, the see-through, the lighter orange on
Yeah,
Pennsylvania,
the
yes,
C3,
that's us.
okay.
well, that's gonna become CBD
The
as
vet
well,
and,
so,
and the town.
possibly.
Okay, so if it becomes CBD after the comp plan, if we were to pass an ordinance that did this change, in that intervening time, say the sheriff's department gets a sign, and then that becomes part of the CBD, they still get to have their sign, right? You
Yeah,
don't
it's
take it away.
grandfathered, non-conforming.
Well, can we just say commercial zoning on each side, not just, it has to be the same zoning, but it has to be commercial zoning on
Yeah, I
both
was thinking
sides.
non-residential zoning
Or
on both sides of the
non-residential on
street,
both sides
something
of the
like
street.
that.
well, what Vincent Street has
That would,
C2 on both sides of the road,
Yeah.
right, that would include a few more properties, so,
maybe state roads.
let's say stick with
State roads with commercial zoning on both sides. That limits it to like the Legion and the police and whoever else is down by the Legion.
Exactly who we want to limit it to, right?
Yeah.
If their first
Can we
letter of their
be that
business starts
tight
with
to
an
say
L,
government and institutional uses situated on a state road with the same zoning on both sides of the street?
I
Find
mean,
out when somebody sues us.
for treating everybody that's in the same situation the same, so we're.
And it's not
there's
spot zoning,
uniform-
right?
It's not spot zoning.
I'd be supportive of that.
I would be too if we can legally do it.
And I can't remember if I shared with everyone, our planning commission chair reached out to me by email and said that she was supportive of limited digital signage and wanted to offer, since she had gone through the painful process that was our last signage iteration, the year with an S, I believe, at the end, and the money that was spent to help work with Sharon or whoever to help draft the text amendment that would be required in support of this, which I have to say publicly, I thought was phenomenal of her to offer that.
Now, the American Legion is residential adjacent to the back there, right? Theoretically, based on the ordinance we drafted, that would have to be,
No,
well, the zoning isn't, though.
behind the Legion.
Separated by a waterway, does that count?
Well, all,
And they have,
Farm.
Yeah, there's not residential right behind the Legion.
yeah, the accountant's on one side, and,
Right, yeah.
Draper's is on
Savox
the
on
other.
one side and Draper's.
right.
but all it would affect would be the hours at this point.
right.
Right, and if it's in front of the Legion, even if there was that.
I pride myself in being able to read maps.
If we said non-residential zoning on both sides, though, of a state road, doesn't that let some of the central business district have it?
Well, I think we would still keep the no CBD.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
And these super strict rules about color and time and all that.
Is that a state road?
Isn't the Legion in here?
Yes.
Where does,
Oh, one.
And
where does fake neon fall in the
what
digital
I
signage
just
of it all?
heard was somehow, let's get, Sharon, do you mind
According to
addressing
this-
just formally
I do
the
not.
R1 behind the Legion?
The R1 is behind the Legion.
So if we're doing the across the road thing, they would satisfy that standard, but if there is R1 near, adjacent to it, then they'd have to do the 10, they can't have it between 10 PM and 6 AM would be.
Right, and there is R1 adjacent to the Legion.
Right. So they would have the hour restriction, but they could still have the sign because across the street would have the,
Right. You're in the red block up there. Yep. Okay.
Joe, do you mind coming up just for one more second? Do you mind coming up just for a second? I just, because you're here, just have a seat if you don't mind. Because you're here, just based on what you've heard, not that you're an expert on signage, but have you heard anything up to this point that you're thinking, oh my gosh, that throws a wrench into what we were thinking?
No, it doesn't. No,
I'm just
I don't have-
curious.
I don't have any problem with size limitations or what we've discussed, or color, or changing frequencies, because, or when we have to turn it off, or whatever, at 10 o'clock's fine, whatever it is. Anything that you allow us to have is gonna be better than what we have now, and we're willing to compromise with any of that.
All right, thank you.
So we still need an ordinance, right?
So that's the next step, right, is for,
We could draft something and
Draft
send
and then
that to the
send it
planning
to planning
commission,
commission.
or we could ask the planning commission to craft something.
don't you feel like less time, less expense if we send?
Less time, less expense.
Kara has volunteered.
I'm for that. Okay, good. We're doing some business tonight. We're gonna draft an ordinance. Consensus for that? Yes. All right, good.
Thank you all for coming tonight.
Summer meeting schedule. You have a memo from the town clerk in front of you. June 15th, we're currently scheduled to meet June 15th and June 1st. June 1st, we have to meet because we have a hearing on the budget and on plastic bags.
Right.
So I guess I'm probably inclined to keep that June 15th meeting.
If we did not have a meeting scheduled, but decided we needed one, how much notice would we need to provide?
I think it's technically 24 hours.
yeah, I don't know that we have anything specific. Reasonable advance
Yeah.
notice is
Yeah,
kind of the
reasonable
standard, and
advance.
it depends on the situation. You're supposed to give as much notice as you can in your normal course, but I've seen where the open meetings, things have been upheld when, with, a day or two notice.
We can pass the budget and the plastic bag ordinance the first, if we want to, right? Plastic bag for sure, right? It's the same night as the second hearing.
The second reading, yeah, both will have the plastic bag ordinance will have its second reading and the public hearing, and you can consider it that night. And then the budget will be that'll be technically the third reading and the public hearing that night.
Gotcha. What do folks want to do here? This is definitely not,
And if you want to schedule it, and then if nothing comes up, we can cancel it, or,
yeah, I'm remembering back to 2022. I think we met on June 23rd because it was going to be such a long time between meetings there. Right?
And we moved it because of MML.
I cannot meet on July 6th. I'll be in Vermont.
It'd be my preference not to have that meeting because the holiday week, and I just think nobody's gonna pay attention.
I feel
That
the same.
typically is the one that's canceled. That first meeting in July is typically, yeah.
All right, so the 20th, we will meet.
Okay.
Is that okay with folks?
Yep.
What are we doing with this 15th meeting in June? I'm inclined to get rid of it.
For me.
I'm okay with that.
All right.
What did you
But
say?
that'd be a
I'm
long
sorry.
time between meetings. so
Works for us to get rid of the 15th.
Yeah, it would be like a month and a half from the early June until.
But we can
middle of
call
July.
a meeting in the interim if we need one.
Okay.
If we're in that first meeting in June and decide we need one, we can give 2 weeks' notice and
Yeah.
have our meeting.
Okay.
And August 3rd and 17th?
We ought to skip the 3rd, I think, and just do the 17th.
All right.
Okay with that.
So we're meeting the 20th of July, the 17th of August, and we're jettisoning the 15th of June, the 6th of July, and the 3rd of August. Thank you all.
Easy peasy.
Reports of boards and commissions, MML,
Nothing to report, thank you.
Council of Governments.
Oh, stand by.
Stand by for your update or stand by
Oh,
for
yeah.
another week?
No, I got it. I have notes, so I got it, yeah. I can't remember what happened last week. I got to write it down, so. Let's see, Churchill had a cell tower installed. I don't know if I mentioned that after the last meeting, but it's still not active. But once it's active, it actually should improve cell phone reception if you have Verizon in the entire north end of the county. So, and I'm sure other vendors will add to that tower eventually. Centreville's looking at putting a speed camera on 313. As you know, I think Churchill's already added, I think they added a speed camera.
Not yet. They're talking.
They're talking about it too. So the sheriff's office is becoming concerned about, since they're the ones that have to review the tickets that are generated by the speed cameras, unlike our town, but yet the police does it. The sheriff's office become concerned that they might become overburdened by all of that. So, Queenstown's also concerned about speeding, but they have no school there, so they can't put in any speed cameras there. So they're looking at other options like speed bumps, but state highway won't allow speed bumps on state highways. So they have limited options on what they can do. There is no one from the county present at the Council of Governments meeting, so I didn't have a chance to ask about plastic bag ban, although I did email a couple of the commissioners to see what they were thinking. So
Are they thinking?
they have not answered me, so. And I have not had a chance to go through all their meeting minutes or whatever to figure out when they ever talked about it. So our next meeting won't be until September, and it'll be in Queenstown.
Right. Thank you for the most thorough Council of Governments update ever. Economic development.
I'm going to defy history and have a very brief update and say that on May 3rd, of course, we had our economic development panel. I mentioned that last time, but I shared a link with everyone. The video is only about 45 minutes, so if you have a chance to look at that, please do. Gotten a lot of really positive feedback, and at our next meeting, I will have a very brief one-slide summary of the most interesting suggestions that were made during the panel discussion. That's all I have.
The Park Advisory Board.
I have nothing Parks Board official, but I just want to say I've been spending a lot of time at our town parks over the last few weeks in this weather, and I'm super appreciative of the town staff for their just quick fixes when there's issues with playground equipment. And so just want to put that out there that our parks are wonderful, and if you have an issue, please call Town Hall because the staff is really, really quick to fix it.
Here, here.
I believe the Parks Advisory Board Chair has put together a GoPro video of the new trail.
Yes.
Can council see that video at the wharf? Should we work with you to schedule that?
Yes.
I thought about that. I don't mean to interrupt. I apologize. It just got downloaded into our shared drive, and I was gonna send it out like as a, it probably won't be a Dropbox, but I have a different similar type that I can send a link to everybody.
That would be awesome. I'd love to see that. Planning Commission last night met to continue on the community plan road and also gave conditional final approval. Those conditions Conditional final approval on the new Board of Education building between Vincent and Railroad, Roosburg Road 304. So that is moving forward.
I have a very quick question on that. Just out of curiosity, I know that they already had reservations, but how many EDUs is the new public central office in for?
The county reserved them when they built the Vincent building.
Yeah, they have 44 on reserve.
Just
Would any
curious.
of those potentially transfer to the detention center?
Can't be transferred.
Okay.
But even though the county owns them all, they own the detention center?
To stay with the property.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that if you were to look at a comparative study, which I hope we will, to the current central office, not water efficient, and I'm sure the building standards for this new structure are stellar, and some level of green. I don't know if they have a LEED certification or anything like that, but my suspicion is the utilization will go down by comparison. At least that's what I would expect to see.
It's a very unique architecture.
That's a good way to describe it.
I will leave it at that.
It's like an alien dropped an airplane propeller.
Do we know what's going on with the detention center?
So they have made progress towards the purchase of the old early release facility. And from a fiscal perspective, that seems to make more sense, but they're not quite there yet. The detention center itself has gone up exponentially in cost, and it's becoming cost prohibitive.
Okay.
All right, we'll move to department heads. Town manager?
We met with EPA to discuss the federal funds we had applied for last year and were to receive for our plant. We met with EPA because while this was originally proffered through one of our senators, as it goes through the process, goes to the agencies that are going to do it. Now, it was $2.155 million. It's going to require a 25% match, which at first raised our hackles. But when you read through the documentation, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, there's a class deviation document and a policy memo that state funds can be used for matching in certain circumstances, and in-kind matching is also available, although it can't be in-kind if it's something we're being reimbursed for. So this won't necessarily be, we've got to pony up the cash. There will be pieces and parts as we go through that will count towards covering that in-kind match. There's no deadline, does not have restrictions, or excuse me, does have restrictions. The Build America, Buy America, it's a list, I'm not going to read you the whole list here. It largely follows state revolving fund guidelines. We have to apply to start the process. We can either apply for the full amount or in segmented parts, depending on how we want to do it. Depending on what part we use or apply for, you get into NEPA and environmental reviews. If we were to use it to buy equipment for the plant, there wouldn't be the NEPA review. So it was about a 90-page document that they sent us that we're still ripping through, and we've got some good points of contact to follow up with. And once we submit for the reimbursement, it looks like roughly 2 months after that happens is the money starts to come through, so which is fairly timely given for EPA.
PER timeline?
The PER timeline, we're expecting the first week and a half of June, and I will pass that along as we've been meeting every 2 weeks with WRA. Met with them again Monday. Very, very promising meetings. We're moving forward. Another thing coming from EPA is a lead and copper pipe survey that has to be completed by October of 2024. KIP has applied for a $52,000 grant to complete that survey. We're going to a webinar on the 22nd of May. I mentioned the completion date being a year and a half from now. They have been changing the standards on this. At first it went all the way into the house, and now it's to the meter and, up to where it's our problem. Now, we know there are some goosenecks in there. The limit is 18 inches, the gooseneck is 18 inches. So we're gonna have to, participate in this survey. I believe it is houses before 1976, which is gonna capture all down by Belvedere, capture parts of the heights. And to your question about what you use a vac truck for when you're digging up around the meter and you don't want to cut the lines, well, that's where you have a vac truck that you can come in and you can scale that out dig it out and go. So we've got to do this, and then that data also has to be shared with the state. One of the interesting things that they're talking about how
Before
to,
you go any further, that's water meters on the property?
yes, right there where our line comes up to it.
The vac truck will tear up my front yard, is what you're saying.
A very small hole, rather than having an excavator come in and scoop.
They were using them during the Liberty and Commerce upgrade, so I saw them in action. Yeah, it's like a vacuum.
Very cool.
It's one of their,
On a truck.
Sucks all the dirt and everything out, so you don't have to dig.
Well, you jet it with the water, and then
Yeah.
it's just vacuuming back up.
Right.
Yep.
I'm gonna tell you where they
now
dumped
now
it.
you get it. Just to go back a little bit before you go any further, you said Kip applied for a grant. Did I miss a communication about that? Because I just thought we've been super clear about grant applications.
We have just started talking about this in the last couple days, and he had to get the grant in by June. I told him to go ahead and do it because EPA's mandated we do this. I didn't feel like it was a policy decision.
We as a council agreed, all grants. And so, like, I'm not saying we have to have a formal vote, but is it that challenging to send an email?
No.
I just struggle with this like unilateral deciding of where the line is when we've been clear as a council on the grant situation. Because this time it might not be policy, doesn't sound like it is, but you guys didn't think the ALPR thing was policy either, and I super think it is. And so just would appreciate the ability of the council to determine the line.
Roger. One of the things with this, as you can imagine, with this survey for lead and copper pipe, it's going to be data intensive, and we're looking at some software opportunities. If we have somebody do this survey for us with our participation in action, they will capture that data. But I would be looking for a software suite that would allow us to start inventorying our infrastructure. Since we've got to go inventory it now, it's a way to capture that, not in just a spreadsheet that somebody says, well, that's old data, that it's an evolving suite of data that as changes get made, as properties get updated, as things get done, we can go back in and correct and have a historical capture of any changes or repairs or corrections that we've made in our infrastructure beyond what we're doing now, which is in going through and scanning historical documents to include plans to say that, well, we've got to save this plan. It's the as is. This is how it was built. So, you know, we've moved away from paper, or moving away from paper as a way to capture this and not have to store it and then be able to go back and find it. This might be something I hope you will entertain when we bring forward something for this. The EPA pieces, while I'm grateful for their support on our efforts, there's also a worry when they get involved. They're in the middle of a thing in the last 24 hours. Baltimore has got to cover the reservoirs, 2 reservoirs at Drew Park, and I'm not quite sure how you go through something that size. It's several $100 million, but I don't think scale matters to EPA. It's a huge ask for them to suddenly secure that water system for the city that hasn't had a problem with their water. But it concerned me because Westminster has just now been allowed to inject into their reservoir to use for drinking water by the state. And so this is something, as we look for the technologies for our plant, that there could be some tethers to this that we want to pay attention to. And let's see, Kip is at a Miss Utility emergency fix, so he's not in. And Chief Hobbs is closing on a house, so he's not with us. So, and I didn't have anything from Crystal or my others, so go back to you.
Do we need a more formal discussion on this inventory of water systems and the potential for how we fund it?
With the, yes, well, I thought
That'll be on our next council agenda, do you think then?
I want to see how the webinar goes and see what we're up against, and then I can give you the more definitive answer. But quite probably, I'll give you a back brief after that webinar.
Is there any more progress been done on the mill?
I did talk to the owner. He did answer my call. He was in Town Hall the other day to pick up, I think for a permit, he's gonna put up a fence around it so that once they start taking the siding down, people can't just go in the building. So, did ask him, as you saw in the email to you all, that his thought was $800,000, the assessed value is $299,000, and he paid $28,000 for it. So, did emphasize to him that this is not just simply the state of disrepair, it has to be fixed. And I've also shared with him that this is beyond his ability to do as a self-help project. But we will see. If he doesn't move forward, then we'll have to.
So he has a contractor to remove the siding, or he just got a permit for a fence?
So far, I didn't talk to him. I was on the phone when he came in. I just heard his name. But the start is the fence piece, and once he puts that up, he has told me he's got contractors lined up now.
Okay.
We'll see.
So I talked to the Maryland Historic Trust and the SPOOM, the Society for the Protection of Old Mills. Yes.
There
One
it is.
exists.
I'm a member.
And
I will be.
does not surprise me in the least. Big mill guy. And there are options for us to work with the landowner to, if he's so willing, or if a future mill owner is willing, to identify funds to restore the mill to the glory I think we all think it deserves, and the town's people and residents and people that come to visit our town. I mean, this town was named Chester Mill before it was Centreville, and named after that mill. And I think that, we have a duty to do all we can to make sure it is restored. And there are pots of money to help us do that. We just need a willing landowner. And I hope that the council can urge the owner, whose name I don't even know and don't need to say on camera here, to come to the table with us and work with us. And it'll be a good project for everybody involved, himself included. Town attorney,
I have nothing.
finance officer, town clerk.
I have one thing on behalf of Main Street. If you remember when she came in, talked to the council about the Main Street Improvement Grant that she applied for, and then she was also applying for it's a NASCAR grant, basically. So you raise funds. If you hit a $750 mark, then you are, they will share, because you earmark, when you donate funds, you earmark to the program you want those funds to go to. But then people will donate not earmarking. So a portion of those funds are spread out across all the organizations for the currently Main Street has raised $500 for the NASCAR. She wanted to remind the council that the funds are being raised to create a pool of advertising funds for Centreville businesses, nonprofits, and schools. And their hope is to get to $750 so that they can share on the general funds donated. The campaign ends tomorrow at 8 p.m. So if anyone would like to help out Main Street, it's NASCARDayGiveathon.org.
NASCARDayGiveathon.org.
Right.
All right.
Click on Centreville Main Street.
Centreville Main Street.
I just like that post.
Oh, it's on Facebook.
Yes.
Wonderful. Council Roundtable. Mr. Beecham.
Nothing to say tonight.
Mr. Worth.
Nothing from me.
Mr. Johnson.
Nothing further.
Vice President Kaiser.
Nothing.
I yield back as well. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We're supposed to have second public comment, and I breezed right by it.
You just said something.
Come on up.
The gavel didn't fall.
You can listen to her, or you can allow me to outline the problem with that.
I don't think I'm
Come on
going
up.
to answer that.
Scott, speak into the microphone. You're welcome to come up.
I'm going to use brief.
Okay. Yeah. It's 8 o'clock.
Anyway,
We got
again, I'm Royce Herman from Hope Road. And the issue is the 305 Raceway. And I predicted that when they resurfaced it.
Hear it at night.
And we had police coverage up there for quite a while, and we no longer have it, apparently. I haven't seen a cop up there, and I can't remember when. And I saw a school bus go down the road at about 45 miles an hour the other day. So it's getting bad, and it needs attention. And there's a 40-mile-per-hour sign coming into town that is missing. And I brought it up to one of the councilmen, I guess, about 2 years ago, and it's still missing. It needs to be replaced because it drops from 50 to 30 in a short period of time. And the other end of the road, there's a stop sign that nobody looks at. About 4 out of every 5 cars that go through there run that stop sign. It'd be a gold mine for some police who wanted some tickets to write.
Can we annex that in?
But that's the problems we're having it on Hope Road.
Yes, sir.
Right, it's in town.
Right in front of the
Stop sign
church.
he's talking about is in
Oh,
town.
I'm thinking the other end.
Maybe it can be
Yeah,
on the
and
Christmas tree one.
it's getting out of hand. So it really needs attention.
I hear some of those cars wind up late at night.
It's not mine.
I appreciate you mentioning the school buses. Maybe in some of your conversations with Sid Pinder, you could mention, I think school buses in town are some of the biggest offenders speeding. I know they are on Green Street. They come screaming through there in the afternoon.
I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah, they
Thank
should,
you, Royce.
they should at least be inside the speed limit.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
Because there are young children as well as us old folks up there on that road.
Have we had the speed trailer on Hope Road?
A while ago, we did.
Should probably have it out
On
there
what,
again.
Tim?
The speed trailer was in front of Linda's house there.
Yeah, they did.
yeah.
They wouldn't, yeah, we
Yeah.
fussed that.
Could we have it there
She
again?
did.
Yeah.
In fact, one day she went down to the end of the driveway with a hairdryer,
That'll put the fear in someone.
slowed the traffic down.
I like it.
I love
I was
it.
going to add to that, I know you have a shortage of police presence. If you would like to get me deputized, I will get my hairdryer out, disguised as a speed camera, and I will pull these people over. I'm sick of it. They're complacent. In front of the church, if there's nothing coming up the hill, they don't stop. They go right through it. And I'm sitting there some of the time, and I just want to smack them. But it's a problem.
I think we have consensus to get you deputized.
Okay.
And we'll get you a real radar gun, too. We don't need
Thank you very much.
Well, at some point, I will figure out how to do this job and not skip the comment period, the second comment period. But we do have a motion to adjourn, so we are through.